China, has their state. Then, in the Louisiana Purchase territory where Napoleon runs, his territory or whatever and stuff like that, what if they explore, run into the Chinese, or whoever is running the show in the Europeans?
So what if the French Empire's hold on America was strengthened, and they were the ones that pushed Western expansion?
And somewhere in the midst, another element, the natives, where do they stand in everything?
It's a matter of speculation with me. I wonder if they would have been regarded by the Chinese as in a more brotherly sense. I'm unfamiliar with the ancient Chinese imperial practices. I was led to believe that they were fairly warlike. I don't know what it is that they did with those they fought or those they subjugated. I know what it is that the Babylonian spirit of Western expansion did when it had its way in North America. But it makes me wonder, would they have reached out to the natives here in friendship? Would they have come to an understanding of them? Because they were warriors, the Chinese were warriors, the natives were warriors. Would they have met them on that level? Or would they have de-emphasized them and subjugated them the way that the Europeans eventually came to do?
See, we have a dilemma on a few fronts. The element of the French in America, the element of the natives in America, and the element of the English and Chinese. 4 elements that you had French that were dominant at the time. They were dominant. It could have gone either way with the Americans, because they could have had a stake in it. Somewhere, who sides up with what, and what kind of war is there over it? Who allies with who?
Again, it is a powerfully alternate Earth. The idea that North America may have been divided between a Chinese empire and an encroaching European colonization. Well, imagine if the Chinese got here way beforehand, and the Pacific coast was filled with their cities, and they had a massive naval presence from deforesting American trees.
I got another thing to add to it. And I'm going to just keep on adding stuff to the mix, because the idea of how slavery was brought into play and everything else,
which is a British Empire.
Which is the British Empire.
Yeah, don't let anybody tell you otherwise. They came on mostly British ships.
They came on British ships. And let's just say if you had Chinese, and let's just say they lost the war with Chinese, would there be still slavery?
Yeah, he means... Yeah, so we were just talking about what if the practice of slavery had been abolished. Maybe the Chinese didn't do it. Maybe because of the French court's presence, because they had abolished slavery before we did. So maybe the emphasis of the British Empire would have de-emphasized slavery in the United States. And of course that means the culture would have been radically different.
Yes, and also we're running into account with French being very dominant at the time. The English like with the opiate wars, with the Chinese, and possibly the country of USA would be divided into smaller countries in the USA.
We're going to amplify on that in a second, but first, this is Spiritus Holographica. Alternate worlds, alternate timelines, alternate
reality.
This is a fine channel on the Joseph Vivaldi Network. But first, we'll talk about another parallel network, since this is a podcast for parallel things. I am Ricky Bearhart, an emissary of the Okanus Network. The Okanus Network, audiobooks, poetry, spoken word, paranormal investigations, talk, a creative baptism for every day. Check us out on Spreaker.com.
Very good. I am Joseph Vivaldi of the Joseph Vivaldi Network. I'm coming on to Joseph Vivaldi. I'm going to plug books on the Amazon Kindle, the audiobooks, my network is the Joseph Vivaldi Network, and also the Joseph Vivaldi blog. Check it out. The Joseph Vivaldi Way of Life.
So, we've been going over on this Columbus Day episode the possibility of Columbus's deletion from his prominence in history. Not just in the way that he has been de-emphasized thus far, but in an alternate, parallel version of history, where he doesn't even make it to America, and Europeans, the European interests in the New World, quote-unquote, were either changed, delayed, de-emphasized, and Wolfman was laying out for us the fact that Admiral Zhen He presided over the last great mercantile imperial navy of ancient China, and that for some reason they were in a position of isolationism where they wanted to destroy these fleets and never utilize them again. Well, in this parallel history, there's also a radical change, because what if that Chinese emperor never ordered the ships burnt? And what if Admiral Zhang He or one of his successors led the ships across the Pacific Ocean, which is a treacherous and potentially disastrous crossing to make. But nonetheless, it was known that it was made because off the west coast of the United States they found Chinese anchors from a much later portion of history. So what if they had colonies there during the 1500s? What if those colonies in subsequent centuries grew numerous? Now, the resources of the North American continent are, in that time they were totally untouched. So what if they built an even greater navy using North American timber? Now we have two empires, one Pacific and one Atlantic. What will happen when they encounter each other mid-continent in this parallel world?
We would have to go to 1860 in the Civil War, because where there was a civil war between the North and the South, there would have been a civil war between the East and the West.
By this he means, of course, a continental war between two distinct nations. Yes. The Western Pacific nation in what it may view as expansion east, and a European Atlantic nation in what it would have viewed as an expansion into the West. So a civil war would be between a nation that is ripping itself apart. What we're talking about is there was never a United States to happen.
No, there was Continental War. I mean, you had a meeting that would not turn out very well, and where, let's just say, where European World War I took place, that would have been the major war that would have taken place. That would have been World War I.
We have no idea what Central Europe or Russia would have been like in such a world. Because when you touch the delicate balance of history, even slightly, you can shift major powers of the global chess game. But all we're factoring in now is that the French had an aggressive expansion to seize the continent, both Canada, what would become Canada, as well as what would have been the United States. But now the French Empire, or the European Atlantic Empire, we're calling it, encountered an aggressive expansion coming back at them from the east. Yeah. What sort of culture would it have been if they had embraced, and they being the Chinese colonists, if they had embraced the natives, would they have allowed them to join them, or would they have kept them separate?
How would you feel? Let me put it this way. How would you feel if you're in the middle ground? If you're the Chinese on the middle ground, and you're Chinese Pacific, and the European Atlantic. Like, how would you feel if you're in the middle, around Minnesota, around Chicago, around all the way down in Texas? Not that they would be cold out, but
well, we're giving you a regional codex to understand where this expansion could take place. There are elder maps that one can consider of what lands were owned by the natives before the European intrusion. Those could also be consulted, but right now what we're trying to find is the easiest way to convey this parallel alternate reality. Would the Chinese have invented the automobile? If they, like, in other words, steam engines, giant, like, in other words, would they have done foundries because they knew metals, you know? So would they have eventually discovered steel, smelting?
How would the landscape of America be, is what he's getting at.
Yes, what would they have done with America's fabulous resources? Not just timber and you know, the elements of soil for growth, but in this particular instance, minerals and such. And the colony being what it was, like, would they have become more industrialized, improving their ships, improving their technology, improving their weapons? Would they have taken their interests south to South America to do likewise in what could be 500 years of speculative alternate history?
Yeah.
What if they never went as far east and they concentrated on their naval power and subjugated Mexico and South America?
Yeah.
I mean, it's an incredible thing to wonder what could have happened. And those Chinese maybe were different from the mainland Asian Chinese that they came from. Maybe they would have lost the Opium Wars, but the Chinese would have been totally recolonized into America.
Yeah.
There's a thousand possibilities, both wonderful and horrific, like all other facets of history, if it's alternate or on the books.
Yeah. Interesting reality.
It is. It is certainly a hologram to consider on the global scale, where imperialism runs wild. What it would be if things were just a little different. What if Columbus saw that light and it changed the entire world because he saw one little thing that he couldn't handle?
I think you bring in the episode home.
Now that we're